Hi, Isabella. So I wanted to walk through some sample size problems with you. And again, your questions are somewhat open-ended. So I'm going to, answer some questions here. And then if you end up not getting your questions answered, then we'll kind of go from this point and I can make another video. But what I'm starting with here is I have a formula sheet and it is under home. Let me scoot this over. So on Canvas, if you go to Home and go to the very first module, I think it says Template Formula Sheet. So hopefully you have this printed out, but there are these three formulas here. So these are the three formulas that you'll use for any sample size problem, okay? If a problem reads something to do with averages, this is the guy that you'll use. You'll automatically use this formula. So I'm talking about a problem that says, okay, I have this situation. I know that the standard deviation is 7 or whatever, and my margin of error is 2, okay? As soon as they start talking about having a standard deviation, and then they say calculate a sample size, you will automatically use this formula. These two kind of go together, and you can write little notes on your paper. These are for proportions. Proportion problems are when they say, I have this many out of this many, okay? So as soon as you read that, I have this many out of this many, and there's no standard deviation given, it's going to be one of these two guys here, okay? One of these last two. Now, how do you decide which one of those two to use? If they say, I have a previous study that somebody else did, and I have this information, and I have, 5 out of 10, then you're going to be using this formula here. The 5 out of 10, you would divide out to get 0.5, and that's what you would put in for P. If they don't give you any previous estimate for P, then your last case scenario is to use this guy. And I'm going to be looking at your quiz, and we'll work with these more, but that's the main idea for this. Now with these three formulas, all of them have that capital E down here in the denominator, and that's your margin of error. That will just have to be point blank given in the problem, just how much you're allowed to be off by. So the E is just given in the problem, and you would put it right there. The Z, okay, your critical value up top, that is going to come from a table, okay? And this is posted back in chapter 8. Get to the right tab here. This guy here. And I'll show you exactly where these are in just a second. But this is a table. So all you need to do for those Z's in that formula is you read the problem. You're going to be given a confidence level, 70%, 80%, 90%, whatever. You're going to go to this table. You're going to find your confidence level. It must be one of these. You're going to go off to the side, and then this is the Z that you would put into that formula. Okay, now this table I give you to 4 decimal places. Sometimes in the homework they say to round to 2. So just be careful with your rounding because that could throw your answer off a little bit. So you're going to pull your Z just directly from this table, and you're going to throw that in place of wherever you see Z. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of the formulas and how to use them. Now looking at the homework. So this is the chapter 8 quiz. So this is problem 2 right here. The biggest thing when all these problems are mixed together is you need to know, how do I know this is a sample size problem? Look at the question. You kind of go blah, 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 blah. Get to the question right here. It says how large a sample size is required. Okay, looking at the next problem. How large a sample size is required? Okay, the question will just point blank in some, vocabulary say, how many should I have in my sample? Okay, looking at this problem, question 2 here, we want to figure out how big of a sample to have to estimate a population mean. Based on previous experience, you believe that the standard deviation is 25.0. Okay, now jumping back, we know sample size, we're going to be using one of these 3 formulas. Again, if you're given a standard deviation, you're going to use the first one. If it's a proportion problem, you'll use one of these two. In this problem, they're giving us a standard deviation. So right away, I know I'm going to be using this guy here. So we are going to have n equals z sigma over e, that whole thing squared. And I know in some of the videos, the person who made the videos, they may write this a little bit differently. They may write it as z squared sigma squared over e squared. Same thing. I just think this is cleaner for me to write, but it doesn't matter. So we just need to fill in these pieces. All right, they give us a confidence level and they say they want our estimate to be within 4.2 of the actual population mean. This is how much we're allowed to be off by. So we're trying to figure out an answer, an estimate for the population mean, and I'm allowed to be 4.2 off. That's my wiggle room. That is my E, that's my error. So I'm going to throw that 4.2 down here in the denominator. Okay. In the numerator, I need to figure out my Z. So the Z comes from the table. You just take your confidence level, you hop over here. It was 99%, I believe. I'll double check that, but here's my 99%. So I'm going to be using 2.5758. And I apologize. Okay, right here, I forgot to check this. When you find your critical value, that's your Z, it says to round to 2 decimal places. So this, if I rounded 2 decimal places, this would become 2.58. So that I'm going to throw in for Z. Times my sigma. Sigma is whatever standard deviation they're given, which is 25.0. So I would do this math, 2.58 times 25, divide by 4.2, push enter. Then on my calculator, I would square it. Okay. Now I'm going to let you to try to put that in the calculator. Okay, because I'm not exactly sure where your problems are arising. So I'm going to let you try that. And you should be able to go back through and see if you get the answer here. It should be 236. One thing with sample size is you should always round up. Okay, so if you do this calculation, you get an answer of, I don't know, 235.2, whatever it is. If there's a decimal answer, bump it up to the next biggest whole number. Okay, now that's technically what we should do. I feel like sometimes the homework is not the best at always doing that, but I'm trying to catch all those problems where they don't do that. But you should always round up. Okay. So that is question 2. Question 3. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. When we go right to the question, how large a sample size is required? So as soon as you see that, you know right away, okay, I'm going to be using one of these 3 formulas. Again, I use the first one if I'm given a standard deviation. Otherwise, if it's not a standard deviation type problem, if it's a proportion problem, we use one of these 2. We use this one if they give us a P somehow, a proportion. Okay, they would either say, based on previous study, I know that P is approximately 0.2 or whatever it may be. Or they may say, there was a previous study and there were 2 out of 10 people, and we would have to calculate 0.2. And my 0.2 is just an example, and you would put that in for P. If they don't give you any previous study, your last case resort is using this guy here. Okay. But again, the Z's come from the table, just like the previous example. The E comes from the story, just like in the previous example. In this formula, 0.25 is just 0.25. And then in this one, the P, it may be given to you as a decimal, or it may be given to you as this number out of this number, and then you have to divide it out. So in this one, we know it's one of those 3 formulas. I read through this. I don't see anything about standard deviation. So I'm thinking, okay, I cannot use this guy because I don't have a standard deviation. Another clue is that it says the word proportion here. Okay, proportion means one of these three guys here. Sorry, one of these two guys. I apologize there. And when we're looking at this, based on previous evidence, based on a previous study that somebody else did, they think that the proportion is 0.66. In other words, they're giving you a P. Erase this here. Sorry, my kids are on a delay today, so they're all home. So just ignore my background noise. All right, so since they're giving us a P, I'm going to be using this formula here. So we have N equals P times 1 minus P times Z over E squared. Okay, so they gave us a P of 0.66. One minus 0.66. And then kind of like the last one, we got to look up our Z, and then the E must be given in this problem somewhere. Let's just do the E. They say that our estimate needs to be within 0.01. The Z is from that table. I need to take this confidence level, and notice they say to round our Z score to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to take this 95%. There's my 95. If I go over, I'm getting 1.96. So I'm going to put that right in there. Okay. From here, it's just a calculation. Okay. Be careful with your order of operations. Typically, I do in my calculator. Actually, I think I normally do 1.96 divided by 0.01, push enter, then I square it, I push enter, then I times it by, in parentheses, 1 minus 0.66, in parentheses, push enter, and then I times it by 0.66. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to try to put that in your calculator. The answer that you should be getting is 8621. And again, if you get a decimal answer, 8621, you should always be rounding up. Okay, so there were a couple examples. I'm limited on the time, the length of a video I can make here with the program that I'm using. So I can only fit 2 examples in there. But let me know if that helps. If you want more examples, I'm happy to do them. Again, this course formula sheet, if you go to modules, it's right under this introductory assignments tab. There's the course formula sheet. And then this table for the critical values, which I would just print these things off. So to get the Z scores, that's in week 8, and it's this guy right here, confidence interval critical values Z. Okay, so if you click that, that would open up the table. Okay, all right, so hopefully that helps you, Isabel. Let me know if you do have questions from there, but hopefully we've ironed out some of your issues. Good luck.